Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Are you looking for another type of therapy besides ABA to help you work with your child who's autistic? Well, my next guest is an RDI consultant. So sit back, relax, and grab your favorite beverage and let's learn more about her in RDI therapy. See you there.
I wanna believe in the truth, but only see what I'm shown. Got the freedom to choose, but can't decide on my own. Follow what the group is thinking, bottle up my intuition till it's popping.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of Inside the Asperger Studios. Today I'm joined with Nancy Gillette. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thank you so much for having me today.
Not a problem. So we were just talking about how the neurodivergents, the autistics view the world and how they're so scared. And you were right. I mean, they hold on to all this negativity in such a way that the negative just forces them into their bubble.
Mhm.
How do we get them to see that there's just one tiny little bit of negative, but the rest is all not as scary as it seems?
hmm Well, and this is something that I've learned through becoming an RDI consultant is looking at the big picture,
Mhm.
right? It's about knowing that really what all autistic people, neurodiverse, really, I would even expand it to anybody who wants to feel good in their body. They want to feel good in their day-to-day life, right? The
Mhm.
difference is neurodiversity, we feel everything so much stronger, right? And so that when we feel or have a negative experience, every brain has that negative bias, right? To think about like, oh, I'm shy, I can't do this. But for the autistic individuals, it's so strong. It can truly damage a soul. And it's just a constant reliving that feeling of intensity to even think about doing something outside of a comfort zone, right? And so this is something that I've seen since for little children and it continues into adulthood. And what we want to do is support that, hey, we can do hard things. Because guess what? Nobody can control the outcome of things, right? So we have to learn how do we sustain ourselves regulated to keep moving forward, right? And so when we know that when we change the shift of the picture, instead of thinking that life is a task to be accomplished, that we need to complete our grade 12, that we need to do this and we need to do that. No, the neurodiverse brain loves quality. What is the experience that you truly want to have? And then you build on that. So if I feel safe and I feel good and I have my supports that I need, including sensory, including movement, including whatever it may be, into my world, I can still do what I want to do in a way that's regulated, that supports how I want to experience the life versus a task to accomplish. Lots of times, again, just being in the field for so long and really just being curious about how this all works. I was helping children, trying to help, I should say, children having to follow the structure that needed to happen, right? But the truth is, it's about for the neurodiverse brain, it's about how do I want to experience it, right? If you think like a grade 3 wants to sit down and listen to a conversation about um, the weather system when it's not their interest, you're going to see behavior increase, right? Because it's not an interest. But if I had a teacher who was explaining, oh, let's talk about Minecraft and how we all code that, the child would completely be engaged, right? So when we have those bad feelings, right, that's not what we need to focus on. We need to focus on, oh, how do we feel good and how do we move forward? Right? Because when we start shifting perspective and focus, that's when things can change. And that's when we start building a quality of life, right? And so for myself, I've done a lot of these processes and it's all about breaking it down because the autism brain gets too overwhelmed. So we break it out down to meaningful, tiny steps.
Mhm.
And we start celebrating it because you're right, the brain is like, no, thank you. So I'm not going to go, hard right away because that's not going to work. That's the recipe for burnout. But what you want to do is just little tiny chunks. and you build on those, right? And understanding it's a process,
Mhm.
not a task to be accomplished.
That kind of reminds me of a story was when I was in high school. My parents used to get calls from my teacher all the time. Reader's not focusing in this class. He's not focusing in that class. And all of a sudden one day they go, you won't believe this, but he's focusing in his science class.
Weird. Yeah, of
And they're
course.
like, maybe that's because it's the class he likes.
Mm,
And if you think about it, it's not just with autism alone, it's also with ADHD. It's
mm,
that if you don't have an interest in it, you're not gonna focus on it. You
mm.
can't because it doesn't hold your attention. And
Right.
parents wonder why their kids can't focus in their classes and then they can it's like that old saying of you can't focus on your homework, but you can focus on the story of a game. It's,
Totally.
it's an escapism, one. Two, it's something they enjoy.
Well, and I would say that's the first thing. It's meaningful.
Mhm.
So, right, when it's meaningful to you, of course you're going to be focused and you want to do better, right? Because it's deeper than a task to accomplish. It's something that brings, for a neurodiverse, for autistic, it truly brings joy, right? And what a gift to do that. And knowing how much can you actually build on your preferred interest, right? For some idea reason, we separated subjects, right? We have math, science, socials, right? We break it all down. But really, when we look at it through a different lens, all those subjects can be completed in a preferred interest.
Yeah.
So, right? So, cooking, for example, right? I have an amazing team that I have the opportunity to spend time with and work with, and non-speaking, and we determined his passion for baking.
Oh,
So
wow.
our engagements are all based on baking, right? But what am I looking at? We're doing, problem solving as when, you know, oops, I made a mess. What are we going to do? Right? Like those type of things. Or we're looking at what kind of ingredients can we put on pizza, right? So that's curiosity, that's expansion. Then we're looking at, numbers of how, what the temperature of the oven is, right? Like, so knowing that learning doesn't happen in this box. Again, I go back to it's an experience. So when individuals have preferred interests, instead of saying, no, you can't do that, I come from a place of, oh, here's an opportunity to go deeper because now we've created meaning in the learning. So then I just build and build and build on there.
And that's why people wonder why their child can't hold a job after so long. It's a lot of times it's not because they're not good at it. It's because either one, they're too good at it, and then
Hmm.
they're bored because it's like a child, it's like your child in school.
Hmm.
You're so good at the subject, you decide to go way ahead of everybody else, or
Hmm.
it's a subject or something you're doing that you're bored of already. And then that's
Hmm.
when you quit your job and find something new. The
Right.
problem is the job market today isn't what it used to be, and they don't look on us as, hey, these neurodivergent kids are bright and brilliant. They look at us as a problem of, hey, we got to learn how to work with this person.
Right.
So,
Yeah. And to me, that's just really a lack of understanding.
yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, the work world isn't the same and it's continuing to shift. What the neurodiverse community, autistic community has taught me is we get to be a creator of what works for us. So more than ever, the work world is changing at such an astronomical rate. When you think of like the technology that has advanced, right? There's a job market for that. Guess who created half, like really, when we think about our technology, what brains created it? Neurodiverse
Mhm.
because they hyper focus on it, right? That's a, a special interest. So it's about, again, really, the shift needs to be about autism only being about behavior because really it's about autism communicating in a different way.
Mhm.
And it often starts with kids, right?
Mhm.
Because again, they're children. They don't have the ability to regulate or to use language, right? So what do we use instead? Behavior. And then that's when we get professionals involved, and then we do therapies based on compliance, right? And all that. So we're never teaching actually the skill of learning. We're focusing on what the child needs to do, which is truly
Mhm.
compliance, right? But when we shift the perspective and understanding really how the autism brain experiences the world, then that's expansion. Then we're teaching processes to support the big picture, right? So I know loads of adults who have gotten successful jobs and they aren't able to keep them because we haven't taught, right? How do we deal when change happens? How do we sustain regulated when that happens? How do we sustain regulated when there's some of that drama that goes on, right? How do I really just adapting to the ever-changing world, which is dynamic and which is dynamic. That's the process that we need to focus on. And RDI does that, in my opinion. I've taken it to another level because I lost my mom
Sorry.
6 years ago. And through that journey, I was like, what? There's got to be do more because I did everything, right? I was very compliant. I checked all the tasks, all those things, but I was still not feeling good. And my mom was very much a similar person. And she did everything right and she passed away super young,
Mm.
right? And I was like, I don't want that to be my story, right? And I just happened to be taking RDI training at the same time when I was focusing on experienced based outcomes versus task to accomplish. And then
Now,
that's when I dug so deep. Mhm.
what got you into RDI training? I mean, what got you into working with those who are autistic? I mean, everyone's got their story of why they want to do it. Either it's they know somebody, or they are, or a little bit of both.
Yeah, I was really young. I was 17 and I had a friend's parent come to me asking if I'd be interested in working with a little child with autism. And
Mm.
he was 4 years old at the time. And I was thinking about doing early learning education. And so I'm a person who was always curious. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to try. And so I got taught. So this was like in late 1990s. I got taught by a consultant from UCLA from the Dr. Lovas program, which is, ABA. And so this person came and flew to Canada, where I live, and taught the ABA program to me. And there was some really great things about it of like understanding maybe some communication, some visuals. Like I was understanding the different um, processes, but I noticed that it was all focused on data collection, right? So there was a lot of engagement, but then I would have to do data collection. And the child and I had such a great relationship. It was just super special. And mom kept on giving me information about he does so well with you when you're working together. He has joy when he sees you coming. And I was like, oh, yay, he makes me so happy too. But then one day after our session, after when we did one of our trials, so what happens is at the end of the child was able to go play and I would do my data collection. And so I was doing my process, and the child came to me, initiated engagement, took a pause, and directly referenced me as an invitation to play. And that meant the world to me because this is what we want our children to do is to initiate engagement, have a shared experience. And for some reason, that knocked me on my boots of this was so powerful because I observed what we've always wanted for this child, right? And I didn't see that on a piece of paper. So I was always really curious about it. And so I continued to work with this family. I continued to, always do my career because now I knew I was hooked on the autism brain. I didn't know what, I didn't know how, but I was like, I want to learn more. And so I started my journey and went to school. And then I went to work in a school. And so I started that journey. And then I saw too many things that just made me not feel good about some of the things I was observing. So then I had an opportunity to do other things. So I've had a very long journey in 25 years and had multiple roles. But the really cool thing is I've worked with super young learners to the age of also 70. So I've seen the spectrum of life. And I think that's a really interesting perspective because, we grow. So how can we again do it the best way? And I've just helped so many families shift their perspective. And so it becomes an empowering journey rather than kind of like what you said, Reed, is just focus on negativity, the never enough, the really hard parts. And when we look at science, we know what focus grows, what we focus on grows. So again, when we can focus on a different perspective, things grow. It's crazy.
In that, would you say that's what led you to getting into RDI?
When my mom died. Well, that started me in my RDI career, I mean, in my autism career and doing so many different roles. RDI, I knew there was a different way because of that memory that I had. And I knew I was doing really well within my job roles, and it was because of relationship. And I also observed that when I was involved with children, the children would do better if I supported the parents, not the child. And so I had that observation and was like, oh, there's got to be something there. And so then I dug deeper into RDI. And that's when I learned the process of true quality of life, because that's RDI's thing, right? Is how do we live a quality of life? And then when my mom passed away, it was just that timing of having my world crumble with losing your mom unexpectedly and going through an amazing journey of learning at the same time. And so that's how where I'm at now.
Now, how do you help support those families? I mean, because I know it's when you're dealing with families who have children who have autism, I know it's hard because it's how do you explain it to them? Your child needs that extra support because their minds think differently than everybody else.
Mhm. Well, and in my experience of talking to parents, again, we all want the same for our kids. We want our kids to do well, right?
Mhm.
And so when I come from that place, knowing that the parents truly want the best for their child, and then I meet them where they're at. And often what the conversation first is around behavior, right? And talking about the intensity that maybe their child is presenting. And then I start teaching about, well, actually, behavior is communication. So we need the behavior is telling something to us. We're just not listening. We're trying to, continue to put a process in place for a brain that doesn't like it, right? Like it's trauma when you think about it, right? And so it's about understanding, oh, my child has a significant challenge behavior when walking out the door, for example. Okay, well, that's transition obstacle. But there are so many strategies that we can implement to support transition. But the catch is parents need to do it with them. Parents need to model how. Parents also need to be regulated, right? Autistic kiddos, for some reason, we think it's just about them and we need to give them the therapy and just focus on them. Well, I don't believe that, right? It's, learning in isolation isn't truly the experience of life. So it's together. So when I can support parents to support the child, then that's learning. Because as a therapist, could I work with the child? 100%. But that's 1 hour out of his whole busy week, right? But if the parents have the skills and the understanding, it is going to be so much more beneficial for the child in the long run. So it's really empowering parents to support their beautiful children to be successful. And
Yeah,
that's how I support them.
yeah, that is so important because a child will mimic their parents. So the parents' behavior needs to be the same to the point where the child understands, hey, this is the proper way to do something instead of the improper way. Because we learn people need to know we learn from our parents.
Totally. We have
And
documentation stating that for
yeah,
decades. Yes.
And
Yeah.
this is why a parent with an autistic child needs to learn how to communicate with their child, because when we look up at our parent, we mimic and we our behaviors from them.
100%, right? But again, we've been raised in a time where task accomplished mattered most. A lot of adults did not understand the ability to regulate, right? So that's the thing. So lots of parents who are stressed with their ch autistic children and their behavior is because the child is dysregulated. They never learned how to respond to a scenario that they have no control over, where there's uncertainty happening. How is that other person supposed to feel? And how do we know you feel safe? You don't, because what have we been told? To fix, to stop, to move forward. No, no, no. Again, autistic brains are emotional beings. Emotional regulation is one of the gifts, but also an obstacle. So we need to be with our children through those difficult moments and figure out a different thing because it's always behavior is communication, right? And so we have to, part of the process is understanding, there's so many triggers that happen in our world that we're just not even aware of. Right. And so when parents can slow down and recognize, my autistic child needs transition time to leave the house, well, then the parent can intentionally plan for that. So they're calmer. They're using support strategies, right? They're using effective communication to support the process of the transition. But we just focus on, oh, we just need to get things done, right? And so when we just focus on that, then you're missing the whole point. And so, again, telling parents of how do we actually do these things. And then when I talk to parents and talk about their own experience, often they had that experience when they were kids, right? Their
Oh,
parents didn't give them the opportunity to express their feelings. They were told to, we were in a time where kids are to be seen, not heard. So anytime if a child protests, like, a few decades ago, pretty significant consequences would happen,
mhm.
right? We don't have that same world anymore, but we never learned how to be in that discomfort and move through it, right? And so again, it's a lot of looking through the experience in a different way.
Now, it kind of reminds me of what I wrote in my book about taking small steps, because I know if you tell, in my book, I talk about how when you take small steps, do small things, don't do big things before you step out of your comfort zone. And I say, don't do it alone, do it with somebody. And I know when you're talking to the autism community,
Mhm.
they're gonna just blurt out and come up to to their family member or friend, and go, come with me. But what I say is, listen, give them a time frame, because then they can look at that time frame of when you want to go, and then they can figure out a time and a place, and that's what's gonna work for them. Instead of
Mhm.
blurting it out, because then what you're doing is you're putting that parent or that friend, you're putting them against the wall with no opportunity to say yes or no, but just to give yourself disappointment.
Well, and to me, that is the process of invitation. Right, again, right? Even again when we're teeny tiny, when we're young, that's one of the things that we work on is how does invitation work? You're right. Just because you make a request, hey, do you want to do this? We have to be okay with either the yes or the no. How instead of thinking, what are we doing wrong when the no happens? The truth is what you're explaining. Maybe somebody has other commitments. So then we go into problem solving after that. But first we have to regulate and
Mhm.
we need to be like that I'm okay with the outcome because I can sustain regulated. The reason why autistic brains become so frustrated when those type of things happen because it's a different plan. It's a different outcome, right? And it's unexpected. But what we need to learn is, oh, that's unexpected and I'm okay. What is a possible choice? Oh, we can book it. Okay. Right? The piece is that emotion, the autistic brain just feels the emotion so much stronger, but you haven't had an opportunity to really learn what's happening. in those moments, right? Because it becomes about the task again when it's no, it's about the process and actually what's going on within that exchange, if that makes sense. Mhm.
Yeah, that does make sense. And that brings up a question is how do you deal with a kiddo who gets the monkey wrench thrown into his plans and they kind of spiral out of control and have a breakdown or a meltdown and start crying because their plans get changed. And because I know from experience at times that can be frustrating. And I know when you're younger, it's even worse because you don't know how to deal with it.
Absolutely, right? And again, so that's emotional regulation, right? Because you're right, when something unexpected happens, the emotion is so strong. And so what I work with families on is development of a very simple strategy of the 5 point, it's called the incredible 5 point scale. And it's a simple thermometer from like one being, I'm feeling good, five at a loss of control,
Mm.
right? So when parents observe their child, at a meltdown mode, that's a five. Before we're expecting any shift, is we have to help the child come down to like a three.
Mm.
Because when a brain is at a five, it's taking no information in, right? It's in the fight or flight mode, crisis, get out of here, right?
Mhm.
It's just totally not rational in any way. It's emotional. And so, what I encourage parents to do is when the child is at that five, we need to give time, reduce expectation, reduce language, and wait. And people hate that answer because we got things to do. And
Mhm.
again, the autistic brain doesn't care about your time.
No.
It's about knowing how is the experience happening. So, yeah, it's going to be emotional. Yeah, there's going to be screaming, right? But to try to teach in that way is not going to work. So we have to support the child to regulate. So that means either time, right? Quiet, maybe some sensory supports, maybe a preferred interest to help just kind of regulate. So then when we're in regulated brain, so at a three or under, then that's when we teach. And then we teach and we experience intentional moments of, oops, that's unexpected. And we're okay. Because then the brain gets used to those unexpected little moments. It can be as subtle as a pen dropping. Oh, unexpected, and I'm okay. Right? But we have to have those experiences, and the parents and the caregivers and the EAs need to spotlight that. Because again, it's about knowing we don't need to go into the crisis mode when things don't work out the way we want, which is what, again, that's what all of us humans want. We want everything in our control, right? But that's not the reality. It's about understanding we have to, how do we be adaptable? How do we
Mm.
be flexible? And the way that we do that is, again, paying attention to our regulatory system, but also creating a life that works for us, right? So, for example, right? I know many individuals. I know this beautiful woman who is a yoga teacher. She volunteers in the community. She's, being a mentor to other youth with autism. So she's doing all these things, but she knows her bandwidth of what she can do. So she's not doing full-time yoga. She's doing maybe 2 hours of yoga a week, right? She's not full-time mentoring. She's doing maybe 10 hours a week, right? And so knowing that to sustain regulated, we need to create a world that works for us, right? And I've done that at a different level of I've created my own business. I work in isolation mostly. I'm working behind a screen, right? I get to choose my work hours, but that was my choice to intentionally create that because I know that helps me sustain regulated. And although I don't have a diagnosis, I have neurodiversities. I come from a trauma background, right? Survived a lot of different experiences in my life, but I've now created a world that works for me. And that's what the autism community has taught me how to do that by doing things differently.
That's very good and very interesting. Now,
Mhm.
let's talk more about and I've known, and you brought this up in some of the questions I asked you. What are some of the misconceptions that people, when they hear autism, what do they think, and how can we change that thinking process?
The biggest thing for me that I think about is lots of parents, when they receive a diagnosis of their child,
Mhm,
it means struggle. And that truly hurts my heart deep because when you receive a diagnosis for your child, what it means is an opportunity to do things differently, to live life more authentic. And to me, that's one of the biggest gifts we can get,
mhm,
right? And so it's about knowing what is possible rather than thinking of the not enough, right? If you want your child to grow up, to feel good and to be confident and feel, connected to this world, we need to start looking at it through a different lens
mhm,
of celebration and, again, possibility. When I know adults, so lots of times I'll work with parents, and parents then will come to a place of understanding their own neurodiversities. And to me, when I see this shift, it's understanding,
mhm,
right? I understand why some things are so hard. I understand why I'm so burnt out at the end of the day. And then what I try to encourage is give grace and start again doing things that work for you, right? Rather than thinking it's a certain way of how to live.
mhm,
And so, again, so thinking when autism means something's wrong. No, it's something positive. Another thing is, the n- desire not to connect with others or unsocial. 100% no. I haven't met one child that doesn't want to connect with another. The challenge is what is meaningful connection,
mhm,
right? So, I've seen beautiful children can connect over a shared train, for example, right? Beautiful. Just because the child isn't, I don't want to play with that, what that child's doing, that doesn't matter, right? It's about, again, when it's meaningful, child is connected, he will learn. You just need to understand the process. And that's what I can also provide some insight.
I'll tell you what's amazing is the amount of people I've talked to, families especially, and when I'm talking with the parent and they go, I took my child to get tested, and all of a sudden I realize as the therapist is going through all these different traits, they're like, I have this, I have this, I do that. And it's just like it's this light bulb of, oh my God, now I can understand why my child is this. Now I can communicate better because I understand them better.
So when we have understanding, we do better,
Hmm.
right? But there's still the implementation, which is a challenge, right? Now we're in a time where information is abundant. And so it's not the lack of information. Now it's about learning actually what knowledge is, which is the implementation of the information. And so now that's the part two of it. But yeah, when we understand, we do different. When I can understand my child, oh, me just talking and lecturing as a teaching modality doesn't work. Ah, but if I do experience-based learning, that's what helps. And when I do experience-based teaching, it's not hard. It's very subtle shifts because, again, right, we have to put the parenting back. We have to put the child back into the beautiful dynamic of parent and child. And so my strategies that I share are very simple and very doable to do.
So, what are some of the challenges you've dealt with when working with the families and children?
Um, good question. I think maybe the unrealistic expectations for where the child is at. It's not like the developmental readiness, right? So, for example, I had a parent think that they could build a fence with their child as a meaningful activity. And I asked the parent, I was like, okay, how long do you think that's going to be? And he's like, oh, it'll be the afternoon. And I'm like, yeah, do you think that's a realistic expectation for your child to attend with you for the whole afternoon? So when we broke it down and truly understood, then it was like, oh, right. So often again, our expectations are not where the child's at. right? And also we forget children need to have a different experience, right? They often just have their own stories about parenting, right? I've met some fathers who have said, well, they just need significant more consequences. Well, no. If, if that type of learning worked, we would be in a very different world. It doesn't, right? So, so when I can share some other viewpoints to kind of shift a perspective, then that is what's helpful. But first, it's about, really recognizing where is their limiting beliefs, where did it come from, and how does it really support what you want for your child. So I would say that is, and yeah, I would say those are the key things. And it's different, right? So I do things very differently.
I bet a lot of your kiddos have surprised you with a lot of their special interests and everything, and you've learned so much from them, I bet.
No, it's inspiration.
Hmm.
It's true gratitude of being able to observe people's journeys. And also exciting because I know the possibility is endless, right? But it's not to societal standards. It's to a standards that meet whoever the person is, and that's enough. Right? Again, we're in a society that of do more, 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 more. No, no, no. That's not the value of the experience. And autism is so authentic.
Hmm.
It just needs to feel good, full stop.
I mean, but you are right, though. I mean, the families need not to look at it as a disappointment when they realize their child is autistic. They need to look at it as more of an accomplishment because we are unique individuals. We think differently than most the world. And a lot of times the people I've talked to when they realize their kids are autistic, it's like this joy because they get to see the world so differently through their child's eyes.
Absolutely.
And it just brings so much happiness to them.
It truly is. That's one of my things that I love talking to parents about is they will share a little moment that I know means the world to a parent, right? And again, in RDI, I've learned so many little tricks and terms and things. And so there was this parent who shared a very simple story of their child walking on grass barefoot,
Oh,
and
wow.
he was 8. Right? Previously, it was so uncomfortable for him. He was such at a dysregulated state. He needed to have shoes on at all times.
Mm,
So when mom and I connected, she's like, and he walked on grass barefoot. And I know
mm,
what that means to that child and for a family to notice that big difference, right? And those are called just noticeable differences in RDI because those are those little moments that showing mental growth is growing, is happening, right? That grass isn't just about walking on grass. What happened was the child's like, "Oh, I want to be curious. What does this feel like?" Rather than, like we were talking earlier, of complete overwhelm and this is
mm,
so uncomfortable and no thank you, right? So it means so much more when I hear these little moments that happen that mean everything to parents. And we have to remind parents, if you notice it, that's meaningful.
mm,
That's what matters most. Not some other, professional that's like, oh, you did this 10 out of 20 times. Nah, that doesn't matter. If you noticed your child doing something different, that's expansion. That's called a just noticeable difference. And we're looking at that's mental growth. That's pushing, that's expanding.
It reminds me of a guest I had whose son was eating the same thing for a long time, and then one day they go shopping, and he's like, "I want to try something new," and the mother
Right?
was just like, "Oh my God!" And then
Mhm.
I had him on and when I was talking to him, I'm like, "What made you decide to want to try new things?" And he's like, "Well, I'm going away to school. I don't want to have to eat the same thing over and over and over again. I want to try new things."
Fantastic. That's what it's
Now
about,
he's literally documenting it, trying new things and rating them on his YouTube channel. I'm like, that is incredible. I mean,
right?
you are doing something. You're breaking out of your shell and you're
Mhm.
trying new things.
How
And that's
cool,
mind-boggling.
right? I'd be very curious of what his experience was as a young child.
Yeah.
And around food too, because often, like, I've been part, again, being in the field for so long, I've seen some programs that now I'm just like, what were we doing, right? And so, which often increases the resistance to food, is when we create fooding programs, right? When, again, like, it's just, anyways, I could go on and on and on and about this type
I
of stuff.
know from talking with a lot of different kids that it's the texture and it's getting past that texture feeling to want to try
Totally.
something new because if you don't like it, you don't like that texture, you don't want to try it again.
Right. And again, knowing that trying is actually the most important thing is
Mhm.
because, we don't know exactly what we like and what we don't like, right? So if there's a texture that you prefer, great. That's okay. What we're in this time now in the world where we can have so many different foods prepared in so many different ways with so many different ingredients and so many different textures, right? We're in this time where so many options. And so it's about, that's okay if that's what you like and that other stuff you don't like.
Mhm.
But it's about, again, how is this food serving you? Right? So is it nutritious? Does it have any nutritional value? Right? A lot of my kiddos don't like a lot of the whole foods. But the reason why that is because it fluctuates and it changes. When I have packaged food, I'm guaranteed it's going to be the same every time. Right? But vegetables change depending on season, depending on the farm, what chemicals, everything changes, right?
Ripeness,
Pardon me?
ripeness.
Yeah, exactly, right? It fluctuates.
Mhm.
And again, if you're dealing in a world that's so overwhelming, what you want to put in your mouth needs to be very expected, right? And that's really kind of in my, like, some of my opinion, right? And there's so many different variations, but when we can start reducing and feeling more regulated in our body, and I help parents with, you know, new strategies and different approaches, what I often see is children's willingness to try more food increases.
Mm.
So, it's again because I feel it's regulatory. So if I'm stressed all the time, you think I'm going to be willing to try new foods?
No.
No. Right? But if I'm more regulated, then my bandwidth is more available to try some different things. So again, it's a different story that we have to learn rather thinking that picky eaters only eat this one food. To
Mm.
me, I have so many other questions to understand more and deeper before we make some judgments.
Yeah, no. Now tell me a little bit about your autism shift program.
Yeah, so I'm super excited. As you can tell, I can talk about this for days. And I put 25 years into a training program for families. And so this is where I'm walking the journey with you for 12 weeks, where we're talking about everything to, how is bedtime routine, morning routine, school challenges, all those things we'll address. But what I'm going to shift is, how do we respond to them? How are we going to start shifting the way we show up with visual referencing, something called co-regulation, which is not the emotional one. It's about understanding engagement is 50-50, shifting communication for nonverbal communication and declarative language for framing. So we're shifting from just reacting to the day every day, which is called crisis mindset, to kind of a growth seeking mindset. So learning that, hey, this beautiful journey of autism doesn't need to be so hard. There's another choice. And I invite parents to come with me, and it's meant to be inspiring, informative, practical, and you will see a change. And so, yeah, so I'm really excited to offer that. And so the doors are open right now, and I am accepting families. And yeah, so, and we will see. I've done training. I've trained in schools and preschools, and I've done parent training, but this is the first 12-week program that I've done. So this is more intensive, but it's to help support momentum and also to build a natural community because, lots of parents think that they're doing this journey alone. oh, there's so many parents who feel the same obstacles. And so it's about creating those relationships and empowering and advocating for what you know to be true. So it's meant to really shift a life.
I mean, that is so important that the parents need to understand how to work with their child and understand that they're because when you have somebody who's neurodivergent, it's the whole other world to you. Your mind
Absolutely.
sets differently. You almost go into panic mode because you got a whole new learning skill set to learn, whole new, you got to deal with their sensory issues, you got to deal with their emotional regulations. I
Yeah.
mean, and I praise you for this because parents need to learn how to deal with it because there are so many parents who are jumping in blind when they're dealing with it. Some do
Yeah.
it the right way, but some just are scared and don't know where to go.
Yeah, right. And again, when I talk deeper to parents about that, it's because they don't trust their own choices. And so, autism too, all of a sudden comes with this massive manual of how you're supposed to do things. And it's very overwhelming. And so, yeah, I am so grateful that I have an opportunity that I can share because I truly know what is possible. Like the observations, the stories, like a really quick story as I was working with a individual, 13, who was on the verge of being kicked out of school because of his challenging behavior and his disruption. Family was almost in burnout. To now, we're 3, 4 years later, but in those 4 years, he's got his driver's license. He's had his first romantic relationship. He's traveled to Germany with his school. His parents and him have a great relationship. He's got a group of friends. He's getting invited to go out. Like he's created a world, which is what a teenager is to do.
Mhm.
But we shifted from crisis because we were just reacting to his behavior to, ah, the expectation doesn't meet his developmental readiness right now. And when we slow down and we shift, instead of making him feel like something's wrong all the time, to, oh, help me understand, let's do it differently, a whole other child came out, right? And because that is what is possible. Does he still have the emotional upsets? Absolutely. But what we look for is not elimination of the behavior, it's
Mhm.
the reduction of the intensity of the behavior. It's the reduction of the duration of the outburst or the meltdown and the decrease of the fluency of it, meaning it doesn't happen as frequent. So we're not looking at elimination because that's not possible. What's possible is, though, but we can experience at a much lighter intensity. So does he still get mad? For sure. That's part of the human experience. But he's not throwing, he's not, being destructive, he's not being hurtful anymore because we've taught different skills. And now we've given him language to be like, whoa, you need to stop talking because I'm really frustrated. And so now we know we honor the stop talking because the other choice is I can still push, but then I'm going to increase the escalation, right? So when we start looking at it and knowing to go to reduce the stress, then we see the growth.
And finally, where can people find out more about you and learn more about the Autism Shift program?
Sure. So you can visit my website at www.nancygillette.com. That's one L, not two. And also, I do have a Facebook group that I am not nearly as active as some other groups, but I do want to put inspiring information. And I also go live in there at Autism, a Different Perspective. So you can find that and if you search it.
And
And then
that's
that's
it, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Reed Miles. That was Nancy Gillette. See you in the next one, everybody. Thank you, Nancy.
thank you. Sorry, I know I go on and on and on.